Hi, it's Martin from Robson Laidler, and I'm joined today by Amanda. Hi Amanda, how are you doing?
Hi Martin, I'm doing well, thanks.
And Amanda, do you want to tell us who you are, please, for the audience?
Yes. My name's Amanda Cowie. I'm a director and chartered financial planner in Robson Laidler Wealth, our sister company, sister company.
Your company, my sister company. So you're a perfect person to talk about what we're talking about today, which is do one thing, which is the motto of Talk Money Week.
Yes.
And the quite simply, we're going to try over the next 10, 15, whatever minutes to give people some ideas on the one thing that they can do.
Yeah, because I think, it's interesting because why do we have Talk Money Week? And it's interesting that it's sponsored by the government. It's funny, it's a bit of a it's a bit like when they used to do public health messaging. They don't do that anymore, like eat your 5 a day. It's a bit of a kind of not telling you what to do, but trying to nudge you into doing something positive. And I think probably this is similar. They want us to talk about money, so hopefully there'll be some good benefits from us all, and ultimately probably them.
And it's backed by... There's a lot of things running concurrently here, but there's a lot of research goes into this, a lot of good data, and the do one thing, I suppose, is that a nod to the fact that these things are very complex, and you probably put it off because you think, I've got to undertake a mammoth task, whereas actually you might be able to start with one thing. I think that's
the problem, isn't it, with anything like this? It's a bit like, when you take up a new exercise or something like that, it seems sometimes a little bit daunting at the start to, start taking up yoga, for instance. You feel it's just taking that first step, and I think they're probably just trying to make it easy for us just to think about any small thing that we can do to put us on maybe a more positive financial path, or help us think more positively about money, because a lot of people feel quite stressed
there's
about
been
money.
Research on this, hasn't there?
Yeah. So what we've been just around about the same time actually as this particular week, there was a really good bit of research that Aberdeen, used to be called Standard Life, have undertaken, and this is the 3rd year running, and it's just talking about how the recent cost of living crisis is affecting how people feel about money, and they've actually surveyed about 6,000 people, so quite a lot of people in different age ranges, just to get a real handle on kind of what makes them concerned, what their issues are around money. And I thought it would be quite good just to tie that in with the do one thing, just one thing that could benefit you if you're in either of those categories. If you're Gen Z,
because they looked at all the different demographics, haven't they?
Exactly.
And it's interesting because I think I'm one of my ex. But I often think that I'm younger than an X, but I'm not. I'm a Generation X. But you've got your Gen Z, Millennial, X, Boomer.
Boomer.
I missed
Baby
one.
boomers.
So you've got your 4 main categories.
Yeah.
And they worry about different things, don't they?
Yeah.
This is what the research has shown. They've got different concerns.
Yeah, and I think probably one of the most sort of startling ones were for Gen X, which is I have to look at this, 42 to 57, so that puts me in that category.
I just squeeze in the bottom end of that.
Just. And they're really probably the least positive about their finances, which is quite interesting, because you think, gosh, if you're a bit older, perhaps by that point you might have got a bit more of a handle.
I thought, you would think, well, surely you've got it sorted by now. And actually, I wonder if the millennials and the Gen Z behind often look and think, well, you must be all right, and yet we're the most worried. Not us as individuals, but it's interesting that as a group.
Yeah. It's funny actually, because the research was saying that if you're a Gen Z, for instance, if you're looking for advice, you'll pretty much look to family and friends. But maybe if you get a bit older, perhaps you're more reluctant to do that, because you feel like, well, I should know this. I should know this stuff.
You can't admit to your peers.
Yeah.
Especially in an Instagram age when everyone has clearly done better than you.
Indeed.
And you go, well, I can't tell them, they've just come back from Thailand.
Exactly. But actually, statistically, they are the ones that are most worried about the future. And you can kind of understand why, because probably you're getting to age 42 and you're thinking, oh, crumbs, life is going really quickly, and what have I got to show for all this work, by now? And gosh, the last 22 years have gone quite quickly since I started work, or 20 years post-uni or whatever, and I might only have another 20 years left.
I wonder if there's intergenerational issues here as well, because they might have a Gen Z at home that's busy sucking a lot of their resource out.
Absolutely.
So they might be worried second hand on behalf of, Maybe there's a bit of that, maternal, paternal worry about the other generations. I don't know.
So
anyway, that's a different topic.
So I suppose we're just thinking about, if you were in that category, what could be the one thing that you do? Because I think really the main issue is doing anything. We talk a lot about well-being these days, don't we? So what could you do to just kind of face that fear head on, really? And it's like any anxiety, what the natural response is just to kind of like park it and just not think about it, kind of bury your head in the sand, I suppose. So I would say probably the sort of people that we sometimes come into contact with, they don't appreciate what they've got in terms of things like historical bits and pieces of pensions. And because what happens is they're so busy living life, they've got their families, they're really busy, that they just get a statement in every year and they park it in a drawer. Standard Life, drawer, Aviva, whoever. Shut their drawer. And sometimes we'll get, if we meet people for the first time, maybe if they're a bit older than that, for instance, in their 50s, panicking, they'll sometimes hand us a big carrier bag full of statements, like, there you go, try and make sense of it all. And so, I do appreciate that that's quite a hard thing to do, but I would say if that's you and you're feeling a little bit anxious about what the future might hold, there's probably no point in just shutting the drawer in those statements. It's probably a good idea just to think, I need to take some time out. And there's a lot of things you can do yourself, because a lot of people say, well, haven't got a financial advisor, for instance, and obviously you think, well, I'm here just to plug our services. I appreciate that not everybody can afford to pay fees for a financial advisor. There's an advice gap.
What you were saying is not everyone needs to either.
Exactly.
Which is quite relevant. Very modest of you, I think, Amanda. Well done. That said, you did pull a stat out. What was the stat about?
That people that take financial advice, apparently, according to the statistics, according to the survey, and anybody can Google...
It's not our statistic, it's not our survey.
They can Google retirement voice, you can get the stuff for yourself. But basically, people in that category feel 3 times more positive about the future having had some financial advice, because hopefully somebody is plotting the way forward for them, helping them see what their future might look like. So there is benefits. There are benefits.
Do you think that's just because they've kind of cleared some of the fog away, and even if the path is still hard, at least they can see the path now?
I mean, it's like they've actually made the appointment. They've actually got to have the discussion, often to bring in their partner as well, which again is sometimes a bit of a hurdle for some people to do things together. But that is kind of a bit of a way along on the journey, really, to be honest.
So to be fair, the one thing that everyone should do if they want to feel 3 times more positive is get some advice.
Get some advice, or...
But we're going to try and be a bit more specific and go into ages as well.
Or, if you don't want to, for instance, we were just chatting about this, weren't we, about how the analogy of kind of doing home improvements, and there's a lot of things that you can do yourself. You can get a paintbrush out, you can sand down a skirting board, you can put up a shelf, all the rest of it. Some of these things you can get from the money advice service, from Pension Wise online. You can do quite a lot of stuff. Not the DIY.
You're on about the financial advice now.
So that analogy, thank you. But when we get to the needing a plasterer, for instance, we can't always find out how to do that on YouTube.
You wouldn't rewire your own house. You probably wouldn't fix your own roof. There is a point where you kind of go,
you might need a bit of guidance.
But like I say, there are a lot of basic things.
And
more than ever now, I spend a lot of my time, I think, telling people to ignore what they've heard online. But if you know where to look, there is some really good advice, like the money advice service and things like that.
Pension Wise. And the thing is, they're not going to give you advice to your specific situation, but they're going to give you quite a lot of guidance.
They'll close you in on.
Exactly. So I think that's something, if you're in that category, you can do something to sort of alleviate the stress, and just to also just kind of get a bit of a better handle on where you're at and where you're headed.
Is that your one thing then for excess? Is that what you're saying?
Thing.
Get the stuff out the drawer. As a minimum, have a look at it and put a little bit of time into understanding what it means.
Also, go
you were
online.
telling me, sorry Amanda, you were telling me there was a couple you saw who'd had fairly modest kind of work and careers who came to you and didn't realise, that bag literally had £250,000 in, didn't it?
At least, I think it was more than that. It was just something...
Not cash. in legacy pension pot
pensions,
value.
yeah, and I think they were quite surprised actually at the position that they were in, that they didn't realise they were in. And that's a nice conversation to have, isn't it? Because then that leads into, well, you know what, you've just come to me and you said I'm going to have to work to state pension age.
Maybe you don't.
Maybe you don't.
Yeah.
And I don't have to. Just from a little bit of basic understanding about where they were at.
So at least get it out, open the drawer, look at what's in the drawer. Is that the one thing?
That would be my one thing. Because it's interesting, because in that particular age group, I think 53% of Gen X think they're going to have to work past state pension age, which is 67, which again is all very well if you're fit and well and you absolutely love your job, but not everybody does, and not everybody is. So I think it's a bit of a contingency, isn't it? So that was the kind of one thing.
You're giving yourself options, aren't you?
Options, yeah.
And on the intergenerational thing, you might say, well, I do want to work longer, but maybe you can now afford to give more to your Gen Z who is worrying about not buying a house and things like that.
And who will always spend the money that you give them.
Yeah, who will always find a use for it.
Always.
Yeah. And sound less accusational in the way they've got a bigger need, perhaps. Yeah. Okay, and so we've done Gen X and we've started there because they're
the most worried.
They're the ones who are the most worried.
Yeah.
So, and you could argue that's the same with anyone. Know what you've got. But let's work down then. Who's that? Millennials next?
Well, it's interesting because the study also said that people aged 36 who are in that millennial bracket are the ones that actually start thinking about the future. That age of 36, they start to think ahead, possibly because they might have had their first children, or they might have got their house. They might be in their, well, maybe not their forever home, but they're definitely on the ladder, hopefully by that point. I mean, I appreciate some areas of the country that's really difficult, but they're the ones that perhaps need to sort of think ahead. But we were chatting about this, we appreciate that when you're in that millennial age bracket, when you've got children, there's a lot of calls on your time and also on your money.
Probably one of the most expensive outlay periods, isn't it?
Yeah. So I would say probably in a similar vein, whilst appreciating that you need to live now, and I'm never one for advocating save everything, because that's a bit grim and a bit miserable, and you never know what's going to happen in the future. But also just have an eye on the future. It might be tempting to turn off your workplace pension contribution, for instance. That might be quite a tempting thing to do when you're kind of a little bit
when you're
under
back's
the
against
cosh.
the wall,
But maybe just give that some careful consideration. Look at how you can save in other ways, like you were telling me about
so my son said, "Oh, Dad, we can get the super fast Sky now," which I thought we were already on, by the way, but I can remember dial up. So rang Sky and they went, "Oh yeah, we can do that." I was fully expecting it would cost us a lot more money. Rang for the price to get an idea, and it turns out I was out of contract. I didn't know that happened with Sky, so I'm now paying less for more services. It's gone down 23 quid, which was about 20% of what I was paying. It's gone from like 120 to 90 quid for everything I get from them, and I was expecting to pay more. I was blown away. I put the phone down and said to Rebecca, I went, it's not only not costing me any money, we've saved money. Yes, I'm in a contract now for 18 months, but I'm always going to use the internet for the next 18 months.
You'll be expecting more pocket money now, probably.
I don't know if that's going to happen. Like, shop around is the old saying, isn't it?
See if you can cut your costs just a little bit, and just as I said, not be miserable now. I'm not saying never have a holiday ever again till you're in your 50s, but I'm just saying it's good just to keep an eye on the future at the same time. So that would be my message for that generation. And for Gen Z, I've got 2 Gen Zers in my family, and I always say to them, don't spend everything you earn. Just save a little bit.
Because we were having a bit of a natter about this, and from the boomers and the Xers say, "Well, stop having avocado and toast every day."
It's always the avocado and toast.
My take on this isn't that it's a literal avocado and toast. That isn't. We're not saying save that £4.50 and you'll get a deposit for a house.
Or £10.50 maybe.
It's save something. We're not saying you're not allowed to have a coffee or just to. You haven't got to jump on the keyboards here, but not that anyone was going to. But it's don't spend every penny. So it's interesting that there's a great book called The Richest Man in Babylon, which I mentioned to you, and the simple premise in there is save 10% of your wage.
Yeah.
Now you might be going, "Oh, that's easy for you to say." It's not easy for anyone to do or say.
It's not.
But if you don't start it at some point, what you'll find is every time you get a pay rise, you just spend more money.
Exactly.
Pay rise, spend more money.
Yeah.
Why not get in the habit? First pay rise, don't use all of that pay rise.
Exactly.
Build up to the 10% if you need to.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't do this, but I wish I had. It would have been so much easier than trying to catch up.
But then everybody says, oh, it's okay for you because it's easy for you to save 10%, but that's the whole point about it being a percentage,
10%,
isn't it?
10%,
exactly.
But, and also, why are we we're the most worried? That's what the stats show, we are the most worried, so yeah.
So we should be
so I think we should be going, it's all right for you.
But it's almost more difficult if you've had a lifetime of spending absolutely up to the max, which is easy to do. Yeah. So almost if you start those good habits early, so that would be my Gen Z, do one thing. Try not to spend every single penny that you earn. Because always when I go out, I go out to schools to talk about finance in schools and stuff. And, we always talk about your life in terms of pay slips, which sounds really pathetic, but it's true. It puts
it into value,
It does put it into value. So if you think, well, if you're working for 40 years, that's only 480 pay slips, which doesn't sound that many.
Not when they come and go quickly. Those pay slips go pretty quick, don't they?
So 480 pay slips. So what you do with those pay slips in those first 40 years of working will really affect later on. So if you can just keep a little bit back and not spend every last bean of those pay slips, maybe you'll have a better financial future.
So this reminded me of a story. It's a couple who both worked at Glaxo, met, wife left Glaxo, Glaxo were cutting back and wrote to both of this couple, one who was still there and said, do you want early redundancy? Wrote to the other one and went, we'd like to, buy you out of your final salary pension. And although she'd only been there, I think she'd worked there about 20 years, her first 20 years of working, but she hadn't worked there for the last 20 years.
So she'd forgotten about it a bit, really?
She literally said, I didn't even know I had a pension.
Wow.
And then she's got a 6-figure settlement and a pretty good pension.
Amazing.
So again, that's like open the drawer, see what's there.
Yeah.
But it also links into your Gen Z of don't spend every penny. It would be really easy for her not to have opted out.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to have taken the pension.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we've done Z. Did we do millennials?
We did millennials. We said, that we appreciate that you might need to spend quite a lot now and you're a bit squeezed, but try and keep your eye on the future.
Stay true.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think your latter one is like my parents, your baby boomers, so the ones that have historically, they kind of get a bit of a bad press, the baby boomers, because it's like, well, it's all right for them, they've got all the lovely final salary pensions, they bought a house when you could get a house for like 50p.
And they're giving them away with crisps. I bought a pack of crisps and got a house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, they get a bit of bad press, but I suppose it's just, thinking a lot of them have actually they've retired, but a lot of people have gone back to work, which was quite surprising, but often because they felt isolated and a bit bored, actually. So
that was interesting. So I presumed it was because when you said a lot of them gone back to work, I was just thinking, but they're taking the jobs that the Zers and the Xers would probably want as a second or a part-time job while studying. But actually it was quite interesting. You said it wasn't for financial reasons. It was to...
Some of it was, but a lot of it was because they were just bored. But also I think some people, after COVID, a lot of people maybe didn't go back to work, or they thought, oh, you know what, I can live on X, because in COVID it was pretty rubbish. You couldn't go anywhere.
Now you're allowed to travel.
Exactly. And they probably thought, actually, you know what, how much money I had saved up possibly isn't quite enough for me. So they maybe hadn't planned for also perhaps the cost of living crisis as well, more energy costs, more food costs, that sort of thing. They hadn't really planned for that. So some of it is financial, but a lot of it is just boredom and feeling a bit isolated. So they've all gone back to work. Well, some of those people have gone back to work. But I suppose for them, I would say, one, don't think that you have to retire. But also, if you're thinking about that, just make sure that you've got a really good handle on what you spend.
There must be nothing more soul-destroying than retiring and then having to go back to work.
Grim.
That must be one of the... That's got to be worse than starting work in the first place, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's really grim.
Particularly
if you hate your job.
Yeah, and I can only do one thing. So that must be soul-destroying.
Yeah, so I think just, perhaps for those people that are maybe thinking about, just have a really good handle on what you spend, and make sure that you know that's going to sustain you for the rest of your life. Again, none of us have got an expiry date, but if you've got longevity in your family, for instance, you might want to think statistically you're going to live above average, and what's that going to cost, and what do you want those years of your life
what's
to
the
look
one thing for the boomers then? Because it feels to me, as a non-financial planner, that they might be the people who would benefit the most from some external advice.
Well, yeah. Also, and some people are in a state where they've actually got more than they need, and then that's thinking about, being quite philanthropic, for instance, saving inheritance tax and gifting as well. So, perhaps if you had a chat with somebody, if you had a good idea of where you sat, a lot of people do get really worried about inheritance tax, but then they don't appreciate what the rules are. And when they come and have a chat, sometimes they think, oh, actually, I don't need to be worried about that anymore.
It's less than 5% if people pay inheritance tax.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why worry about something that isn't a problem?
Monster, isn't it? Yeah.
I know. And or things that you can actually do about it as well. So
with time, I would say inheritance tax is completely voluntary.
Totally is.
As long as you've got enough time, it's completely voluntary. And people think I'm mad when I'm saying that, but
it's true.
all you've got to do is have no money.
Exactly.
That should be easy.
Or even just have £1 million.
Or have less money. Yeah, sorry. I think the thing that often stops people from doing inheritance tax planning is they think, I need all of this.
Yeah.
And you or Neil said to me once, very few people come to you at that age and have an accurate handle on what they can do. Yeah. Just as often people are underprepared as they are over-prepared.
Yeah.
You've got too much. It's like,
I know.
Why are you working?
Mad.
You should have retired 5 years ago. Really? It's like, you would want to know that, wouldn't you? I would want to know if you...
That's financial planning in a nutshell, really. Yeah. And it's almost funny because you think, well, you're almost telling people what they should know, but it's often just because they haven't taken the time out to think about it properly. And also maybe there's a lack of understanding of what the rules are out there.
There's always an excuse, I think, or a reason. To be more fair, there's always a reason because, you're trying to find a house, you're trying to build a career, you're trying to have kids, raise kids, get your kids out, get your kids on the property ladder, look after the grandkids. There's at every point in life there's a unique challenge. Yeah. It's always a unique challenge. Everyone's always worse off than everyone before and after them. But I do feel like that, like there are a lot of people there where they kind of go, you really have to lift your head now because just as much as it's terrible to have to go back to work after retirement, imagine if you found out you didn't have to do the last 5 years. No. And you've done them now. Crazy. What a waste of life. Never mind pay slips, think about how many more summers you've got. When you had 20 summers and you worked 5 of them, you didn't have to. Wow. Mad. So that would blow my mind if I did that. So it's just about planning, really. But I think there are things that we can do ourselves. Just take a little bit of responsibility, take a little bit of time out, and just to have a good think about where we are and where we want to get to. What do you say to the opposition? Because I've seen a lot of celebrities and people and gurus and all kinds of people get absolutely slated when they say take a bit of personal responsibility. You're not trying to you're not trying to dismiss people's challenges there. No, not at all. It's just that you might be able to do something. Don't think you can't do anything. There's normally something, isn't there? I totally understand that, but I do think that there is a lot of anxiety out there around a lot of things, but financial anxiety is one of them. Yeah. And I think if you can, alleviate that just by taking a little bit of action yourself, you might be surprised. Actually, you might, and it might just reduce your anxiety a little bit. Having a plan is always a good thing, isn't it, in life? Just to have a bit of a plan. And I think that's something that we can all try and do. And even if you struggle to do that yourself, even speak to a lot of people. Speak to a good friend or somebody you feel you respect that's quite trustworthy with money, I suppose. Make sure they're actually worth speaking to, not just those have nice holidays. They must be doing all right. Exactly, but somebody that you that you trust, or take some advice if you need to. It's not. I don't know how relevant this is, but I remember when I first started working years ago, there was a guy who, I'll just say, his industry was golf related, and it was dead exotic. And I remember doing the P11Ds, and they both had 3 Series BMWs. One was convertible. I was an 18-year-old. I was like, this couple are living. And I looked at their address, and I was like, wow, they live somewhere really cool. I remember speaking to Eddie Constable, who's one of our ex-directors. He said, yeah, but Marty, it's a lease car, it's a rented house, and his business isn't making any money. And I was like, it's a good job I didn't aspire to be more like them then. And I think there is a lot of that. I think a lot of the financial anxiety comes from comparing yourself. The Jones quite often are just in the same boat as you.
Well, that's right.
We're all battling the same battle. We're all up against the same thing, aren't we?
No, that's true. But again, they're possibly more worried than you. They're just not showing it.
Just better at blagging.
And they've got better pictures on Facebook or something.
They just had to do a basic photography course. They know how to make their holidays look glam. They're still in Skegness with you. But And the other thing, we're just there's a tiny little podcast out, Steve Bartlett, the Diary of a CEO.
Really good.
You might not have heard of a tiny little podcast, only got a couple of 100 million viewers. There's a guy on there, and it's quite interesting. He said often you feel like it's hope that's missing. So if you're Generation Z and you think, we're sorry for you, but avocado's not going to get the I get that. But what he said is, it's often you think, well, what's the point? There's no hope. This isn't my tip, it was just something I watched on this. It said, just like, save anything you can. Which as it is, it's exactly what you've said. Don't spend everything. Save something is the opposite of that. And then once you realise that you can save, even if it's small, once you hit that milestone, whether it's £100 or £1,000 or £10,000, whatever that milestone is enough to trigger you to think, this is worth doing.
This is worth doing.
You never know, I might get there. And he seems to be suggesting that it's the lack of hope that actually is the critical thing. It's not the lack of resource or ability or intelligence.
And
it's
do you
the
not
lack of
think the
hope.
media does sort of breathe that a little bit, because there's a lot of articles out there and that'll suggest that there's what is the point, and poor generation rent, and I do feel so sorry for people that are having to rent at the moment. So I've got 2 daughters that are currently renting, and I know how expensive it is. But I think it's just setting some goals, isn't it? And as you say, if you thought, well, I'm going to save £1,000, I'm going to have an emergency fund just in case something like the car breaks down or something. That would be, at least if you've got to that point and I've ticked that off, it might just galvanise you into something else. It was interesting, because I was talking about someone who I know. I got to be careful not to give anything away, but very young lads, still training, still in their career. Who said, oh yeah, we bought a house last year, and I was like, oh, how have you done that? I thought it was impossible. And I kind of went, well, yeah, we just saved up. I was like, wow, but I thought that was impossible. But then also, where they're living, it's really important. The property ladder is a ladder for a reason. There's a starter home, couple of houses, average home, and then
couple
your
of
forever
houses,
home
mansion.
Kind of thing.
And your forever home can be anywhere on there, but your starter home should be near one of the bottom couple of steps. But I think people kind of go, oh, the average house price is what, 280 grand. Not in the northeast, it's not. You can get a house, within 5 miles of us, you'd find a house for 50 grand. Which 2 minimum wage people can buy a house for 50 grand. And they go, oh yeah, it's alright for you, Marty, but set, have a plan.
Just have a plan.
Don't think small. I can't buy a 300 grand house. You probably can't today. You don't have to do it today, though.
It's like, I'm not going to have £500,000 in a pension pot today. No, you're not. But you're going to start saving, and then with returns compounding over time and a little bit more saving, you will get somewhere.
Just like the couple
start.
with the modest jobs who had £250,000 that didn't even know was there.
Didn't even know. So there you go.
So something for everyone.
So that's the motto.
Do one thing.
Do one thing.
Do one thing. If that one thing is, I want to be 3 times less worried than other people, I'm sure Amanda would be very happy to help. But either way, there's plenty of advice out there. We can put a link, I think, to the Money Advisory Service in the chat as well, and pension-wise. Very easy, and a lot of good resource out there if you need it.
To get started. Thank you.
But also, talk about money.
Talk
Most
about
Brits
money.
don't like to do that.
No, too embarrassed.
Thank you very much, Amanda. That's been fantastic.
Thank you.
I hope you have found that useful.